Hey guys, Professor Matt with an overview of Chapter 5. So, Chapter 5 has to do with research. Now, research is the beginning of the public relations process. So, you're going to see here, we're going to introduce to you the RPIE cycle. Okay, it's a cycle because it starts with research, but then it goes to planning, then implementation, then evaluation, and then it goes back to research. So, it's a cycle, right? But this will give you an idea of how we do public relations. Like, what's the process for doing it? Um, so, there's a number of different kinds of research, but let's talk about how research is used in public relations. First of all, there's something called formative research, and that's research that's done before any kind of public relations effort has before we begin any kind of PR effort, right? Because we have to find out what is the situation that we're in. Is it a problem? Is it an opportunity? Okay, and part of that formative research is to do what's called a situation analysis. Another part of that formative research is to do publics analysis. Now remember, I said before that we never do a campaign or a public relations effort for the general public, right? We have a public that is specified, that's defined, that's targeted, and we want to know as much as we possibly can about that public in order to communicate effectively with them. Okay, so we make sure in this part of this formative research is that we understand the publics that we're going to address in this PR effort. And the last part of the formative research is do a organizational analysis. And typically the way we do that, this is a classic thing that a business does, marketing does, and so forth, is what we do is called a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what we're trying to do is figure out, again, what is the core competency of this organization? What do they do well? What are some weaknesses? And by the way, in terms of marketing or positioning in marketing, you want to capitalize on a strength and you want to minimize a weakness. You want to find out what your niche is. Like, where are you in the marketplace that you can excel in? And then finally, opportunities and threats that we need to do. So formative research then is the situation analysis, publics analysis, and the organization analysis. But there's also the summative research, and that's research that's done at the end to sum up what they've done, right? So you do summative research because you want to evaluate whether you were effective or not. And that's super important to know. Today, more so than ever, clients expect that you can demonstrate a clear ROI, return on investment. We have to somehow, what we typically say, we have to move the needle, all right? So if the needle's here before the campaign, that needle has to move in response to your PR efforts. Otherwise, you're going to have a client or a boss that says, why did we give you money? I had a client years ago. They were part of, when I worked for this agency, that was giving us $30,000 a month on a retainer. So you can imagine after 3 months with almost $100,000, they want to know, what have you done for our money? And we do that with the summative research. Okay, so let's break down a little bit what we're doing in some of these areas in terms of what that looks like. Already talked about the SWOT analysis, the publics. We're talking about internal or external publics and so forth. But we also need to know in the publics, in addition to internal and external, we need to know if they are a latent public, an aware public, or an active public. So let me just explain what those are. A latent public, these are people who are affected by a situation or a problem or an issue, but don't yet know that they are, okay? An aware public is a public that actually recognizes that they are affected by an issue or a problem. And then an active public is one that's aware and they're behaving, they've coalesced into a public that is doing something about it. It's important to know where your public is on that whole situation. Okay, so in this chapter, obviously, it's about research. You're going to have to take a research methods course sometime, I would assume. This just it's a broad 30,000 foot perspective on some of the things that in research, basic stuff. So one is we have a distinction between qualitative and quantitative. Okay, qualitative and quantitative. So when we talk about quantitative research, we're talking about a research that can be extrapolated to a larger audience. So that means you have to get a sample size that's large enough, and that the means for gathering the data is going to be scientifically valid. So things that fall into the area of quantitative research, like surveys, experiments where you've got treatment groups and so forth, content analysis where you're breaking down content into different categories. Qualitative is less sort of numbers oriented, right? Qualitative, the answers are open ended, and a lot of times if you're looking at research design, you might start with qualitative research because then you can kind of know maybe what to do for quantitative. So now open ended interviews. I mean, there are some interviews that can be quantitative if you were to do structured questions or statements. So you could say a statement and then say, do you agree with this? No, what's your response? Level of agreement. It could be highly agree, neutral, disagree, highly disagree. That would be a structured kind of a quantitative. But an open-ended interview would be a qualitative research method. Asking questions. What do you think about? Last time this happened, what were your thoughts? And so forth. Interviews, focus groups, and so forth. Another kind of category distinction in research, in addition to qualitative and quantitative, you've got primary and secondary. Now, the weird thing about this is that secondary you do first, and primary you might do second. Because that's the part that's a little weird with it, the way it goes. But secondary research is all the stuff that's been done before you. It's the research that exists right now. You're taking advantage of research that's already been collected. You might crunch that data for other conclusions. But primary research, you're actually going to be creating new data through your research. Okay, and there's formal and there's informal research and so forth. Okay, and here's the thing to know is that a lot of times it's like, how do you select what kind of research you're going to do? It depends on time and budget. What is your client willing to pay, and what's the time frame? I mean, obviously, if you're trying to show that stuff has changed, for example, let's say you're trying to demonstrate that awareness has been raised. To do that, you need to know what the awareness level was prior to the campaign, and that takes some effort, right? You've got to benchmark that. So you say, but prior to the campaign, the research showed that the awareness level was only 15% of consumers knew who your company was. You implement the campaign, you research again, and you find out, okay, that now it's 25%, which is great. That's 15-20% increase in awareness. That takes money and time. So but the key is you want to build this into every campaign that you can. Certainly formative, certainly summative. Both need to be there in order to be effective in public relations. No effective PR plan was ever built on fiction, right? So our job is to find what's the reality of the situation. A lot of times clients don't know. They have this idea of the way things are, but our job is to give them a reality check and say, well, I know you thought that your clients or your customers thought this about you, but you're actually more like this. And if you know what that is, then you can build a plan that's designed to address that. Because the worst thing that can happen is that without proper research, you can spend a lot of money on developing a plan that's got great strategies and great tactics, all kinds of cool things, but doesn't address the problem that you've been hired to solve, okay? And that's why research is so important. And finally, at the end, you want to check out again the back of the chapter on ethics. It goes into utilitarianism, really important concept in terms of how that's used in business and how we can access that and use that for public relations as well. Okay, folks, that's the chapter review for chapter 5. Read the chapter yourself. Take the quiz. Look at the PowerPoint that's been uploaded, and then make sure you respond to the question in the post and respond section on Canvas. Until next time, good luck. We'll see you again soon.